So I'm in the process of going back and watching a bunch of movies that I probably should have seen but didn't. That includes the Carrie movies. I think I did see the remake Carrie movie a while ago, but if I did, I can't remember it. So I just said, forget it. Let me just go back to the beginning. There's other movies that I have to check out. You know, The Hills Have Eyes, the Fright Night movies, a number of the Texas Chainsaw movies, some of the Prom Night movies. I'll cover all those videos or those movies in future videos. So this movie budgeted $1.8 million and the box office is $33.8 million, which is pretty amazing for a horror film of the 70s. Now, I'll do my usual, break down the reviews from Google and all these different sources, and then I'll give my personal take. Internet Movie Database 74, Metacritic 86, Google 88, Rotten Tomatoes 93. Those numbers are pretty amazing for any horror film, whether it be a slasher horror or whether it be a psychological suspenseful horror, whether it's a Halloween or Scream or whether it's a Conjuring or Insidious or Exorcist or anything in between, whatever the case may be. The movie was directed by Brian De Palma, distributed by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. So, in this chilling adaptation of Stephen King's horror novel, withdrawn and sensitive teen Carrie White faces taunting from classmates at school and abuse from her fanatically pious mother at home. When strange occurrences start happening around Carrie, she begins to suspect that she has supernatural powers. Invited to the prom by the empathetic Tommy Ross, Carrie tries to let her guard down, but things eventually take a dark and violent turn. Now, here's the cast before I get to how Commons Media breaks it down. So the character of Carrie White is played by Sissy Spacek. John Travolta played Billy Nolan. Piper Laurie played Carrie's mother, Margaret. Amy Irving played Sue Snell. Nancy Allen played Chris Hargensen. William Catt as Tommy Ross. Betty Buckley as Rita, and PJ Souls as Norma. Now, here's how Commons Media breaks it down, and then I'll get to my personal take. Had to scroll down some. Now, are there any positive messages in here? Not really. Some teens are portrayed as cruel and calculating bullies. Yeah. A religious zealot uses her fanatic beliefs to abuse and control her daughter. Some characters, including a gym teacher and a fellow student, try to help a timid young girl who is being bullied. Yeah, so those are about the best characters in the film, so good for them. Parents need to know that although it's far less graphic than other horror movies, this film adaptation of the classic Stephen King novel of the same name does include some fairly intense, emotional scenes of violence, death, and destruction. Carrie's mother is abusive to her and even threatens her life. In the oft-mentioned bloody prom scene, Carrie uses her telekinetic powers to massacre everyone out of vengeance for a vicious prank and bullying behavior. And then some of the other stuff there has a description that just has some stuff that I choose not to say on here because it gets a little bit cringy, a little bit uncomfortable. Again, 92 kids said something about this movie and 33 parents. I don't believe that this is something that my parents would have let me watch as a kid, even though it's not quite as far as the violence, they're right. I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as, Halloween, Jason, Freddy, Scream, any of that. But still, it's enough to just be like, hey, this isn't for you. Wait till you're older. Now, how Commons Media breaks down the story is, although it's billed as a horror movie, Carrie is just another poignant story of a bullied, lonely teen. With her stringy hair, mousy appearance, and beaten down posture. Stringy? Sissy Spacek gives a heartbreaking performance as Carrie, who is tormented by her high school peers and abused and extremely sheltered by her religious zealot mother. Meanwhile, Carrie struggles to understand the power she has to make objects move with her mind, telekinesis. She experiences a brief period of happiness after a popular boy asks her to the prom and a concerned gym teacher takes Carrie under her wing. But that happiness is short-lived thanks to a cruel prank, and Carrie unleashes her telekinetic powers in an explosive act of revenge. Now, is the movie good? And by the way, Commons Media gave it an 80. That's good. This is probably the best film adaptation of a Stephen King novel, Carrie, helped launch the careers of several young performers, including Spacek, who received an Oscar nomination, Amy Irving, John Travolta, and Nancy Allen. Yeah, it's hard to imagine John Travolta was in a movie like this, but I mean, hey, it was the 70s. I mean, he was still, up and coming then. I mean, he wasn't obviously what he is today. You would never see John Travolta in a horror film today. And some of the others, I would assume the same thing. Almost painful to watch, the opening shots of a volleyball game in girls' locker room depict the vicious bullying Carrie endures. The climactic prom night scene begins with a breathless Cinderella-like feel. The interaction between Carrie and her date Tommy is sweet and hopeful, and Spacek looks radiant. This scene, however, becomes terrifying after some cruel bullies send Carrie over the edge. Talk to your kids about... Families can talk about how the movie handles the issue of bullies and their victims. Does Carrie's school appropriately deal with the students who pick on her? How does this 70s horror movie compare to some of the real bloodbaths you see today? Is it more or less scary and effective? First of all, I mean, I would say that a lot of today's films, I mean, you could say some back then too. I mean, you can argue stuff like, The Exorcist, and I would even kind of say Poltergeist from what I remember of that. And I'll go back and watch all of Poltergeist again too to give my review on that. I think there was a couple of those movies I missed as well. I saw the original and the remake. Yeah, I would say that this one was a little bit less scary compared to some of the other ones I've seen. And as far as my take on it, the movie was a little bit less than what I expected, to tell you the truth. And honestly, I would probably give this about a 5 or 6, only because I think the build-up was slow and boring and dry. I would say probably arguably the best scene of the movie was near the end when, after she took the stage at prom and the kids pulled a cruel and vicious prank on her when they had a bucket of blood go, it was over her head, covering her body, and she used her telekinesis to basically exact revenge. And after all the things that she endured in there, it's kind of like, I'm not necessarily mad at her for that. It's like, those kids kind of had what was coming to them. I mean, let's face it. They did it, so, hey, you got to take the punishment. And I don't think that this is something I could watch again. Now, I've heard some people say that the remakes are better, which is something you don't hear too much. I mean, that kind of says something about the original here, because when you look at originals and remakes for almost any other horror franchise, 90 to 95% of people who've seen all the movies are going to say the originals are the best. But that doesn't seem to be the case with this one. Now, I've already seen some of the reviews for like some of the later movies, and I've seen scores that were really low in comparison to this one. I mean, you're talking in the 20s and 30s of percentages. But overall, I would say that it was kind of all right. I think it was kind of worth a watch a little bit. But for me, I think the thing for me that would keep a movie interesting is it would have to have that feeling of intensity and suspense throughout most of the movie. And they kind of had a brief moment towards the beginning. Then for the next hour, it was all just kind of boring and dry. And then towards the end, it's like, oh, okay, now it's getting real. Oh, she's not playing around here. So I would give it about a 5 or 6, 5.5, maybe 6 at most, if I'm being, nice about it. So other than that, that's my take on this movie. When I watch the other movies, I will let you know what I think of them. Let me know what you think of this movie. And like and subscribe. I got more coming.